On behalf of the Shrewsbury Coalition for Addiction Prevention and Education, which is what SCAPE stands for, in Shrewsbury Youth and Family Services, I want to welcome you to our forum tonight titled Middle Schoolers at Risk, What Every Family Needs to Know Now. Tonight you'll hear from experts on topics such as vaping, social media, gaming, marijuana, and importantly, how to talk to your kids about these addictive behaviors. The Shrewsbury Coalition for Addiction Prevention and Education is comprised of a wide representation of community members joining together to help reduce substance abuse and its consequences and impact among youth and adults in Shrewsbury. The coalition consists of representation from youth, parents, business, law enforcement, school and public service officials, community leaders, healthcare professionals, based organizations, media, state and local government agencies, along with social service providers and other community representatives, all working collaboratively to identify and implement community-wide strategies to address issues concerning addiction prevention and education. And would just like to take a minute, would all the SCAPE members of the coalition please stand for a second so people can see who's involved in this? That's you guys, Cassandra, Jennifer, thank you. SCAPE has previously held several awareness events. Perhaps you've been to some of them. We had a community awareness forum on the opioid epidemic in April of 2016 at the high school. We hosted a screening of the film If Only, produced by James Wahlberg of the Mark Wahlberg Youth Foundation in October of 2016. And we held a presentation last November at the high school, Dr. Ruth Pody, on adolescent brain development and the impact on teen risk-taking, including alcohol and substance abuse. Shrewsbury Youth and Family Services is our community's only private non-profiting counsel and social services agency, providing a diverse offering of programs and services that help to strengthen and support youth and families in Shrewsbury. We have our executive director, Director Christine Mowry here with us this evening, as well as Jennifer Rifkin, who you're going to hear from, who's our Director of Clinical Services. And could I just ask if there's any board members here, if you could please stand for a moment to be recognized. You get a double standing here, Jason, for. And I know that Tom Kennedy I saw here, and Kathleen Cohane as well around the room. So thank you for being here this evening. I also want to thank Sherwood Middle School Principal Dr. Jane Lazard and Oak Middle School Principal Dr. Ann Jones for working with us in planning tonight's forum and helping us to publicize it among your parent populations. I'm going to be introducing each speaker this evening, who will talk for about 15 minutes on their area of expertise, and then we'll have 30 to 45 minutes for questions and answers. The goal is to provide insight into the challenges and pressures that our middle schoolers are facing in regards to substance abuse and other potentially addictive behaviors, and how to detect if your child is perhaps either at risk or exhibiting signs. It's important that you all are here, and I really thank you for being here. As Dr. Jones recently remarked, middle schoolers today are exposed to risks unlike those we ever experienced as kids. Parents need to know what these risks are and how they can keep their child safe now and before they enter into high school and while they're in high school. I hope that you will relay what you hear tonight to your friends and family members and neighbors who aren't here. And we're also lucky that we have Shrewsbury Media Connection here tonight taping this so that we can play it on local access as well, and hopefully continue to inform our community about what the challenges are that our youth are facing. I was also really glad tonight that we had here the Hidden in Plain Sight, and I hope that you all got a chance to see that. I wanted to thank Liz Haddad, who's a member of SCAPE and also the Central Mass Opioid Task Force, which is headed by District Attorney Joe Early. And Joe is here with us tonight, and I wanted to give him a chance to say hello. Joe?
I'm going to be real brief. This is an unbelievable turnout. You just don't get this all the time. We're in your schools all the time. We've got two programs, one for the middle schools. This is not about drugs, which is about opioids. I'm not sure if we exactly presented yet or if we're going to be presenting. It's an evidence-based program. Teaches young 7th and 8th graders about the morphine molecule. And I don't want to step on anyone else's thunder. Just two things when we do present. Number one, delete never means delete. And anybody who saw Facebook on 60 Minutes last night saw that Facebook literally keeps a personnel file on everybody. And in the United States, they own that. Overseas, over in Europe, they actually just passed some legislation where the person whose property it is owns that themselves. I'm sure that will be addressed here a little bit more. And one thing on social media, delete doesn't mean delete. When we have a serious crime or a homicide, first thing our detectives do is go into the phone. And you can tell your kids this. It's good for all of you to know as well. Delete's only temporary. When we get into the phones, that information usually is still there. And the other message we leave the young people with is, I talk about, I got approached once, and I told this at the high school. If anyone's already heard this, I apologize. I told them two things. One, if you have a child who's getting their wisdom teeth out anytime soon, remember this. 2 Advil and a Tylenol are just as effective as a Percocet, and that's been scientifically proven. Okay, when you go, they try and send you home with 30 pills, please say that to the doctor, I don't need that. Could you give me 1 pill, maybe 2 pills? But you really, in most cases, can get away with a combination of Advil and Tylenol. The other thing, when we talk to young people, we talk to what identifies them. You know, how they come out to the rest of society. And I tell them it should be what's in your heart. Unfortunately now, with the smartphone, too often it's what's here. And there's a story, a young man, true story, came into my office after a couple of people said to me, Joe, could you call your friend J.P. Ricciardi? J.P. was the general manager for the Toronto Blue Jays. And up until recently, he was an assistant general manager for the New York Mets. And they told me about a young man in Worcester, 6'7", lefty, threw the ball in the 90-mile-per-hour range, okay? Never had any real pitching instruction, never had any real weightlifting or strength training instruction. They said, would you call your friend JP and let him know about this kid? And I said, I won't refer anyone or give anyone a recommendation until I've met with him. Kid came in, he was the nicest kid in the world. I was so impressed with this young man. I called my friend JP and I said, Jay, I know your draft's coming up next week. Are you going to draft this kid? I went through the upsides and he said, Joe, no. And I said, why, Jay? He goes, everything you've said is true, but the first thing we do now, and it's not just Major League Sports, it's jobs, it's everything. The first thing they do is look at the social media for that young man, young woman. And what they found on his social media, they found alcohol, they found drugs, and they found pot. He said, we don't want them. We sign multi-million-dollar contracts every day, and we're not going to take a chance. So warn your children, be careful what you post. If it's a picture, if you can't put that picture on your refrigerator in your kitchen, it shouldn't be going out over the internet because you can't get it back once it's out there. You've got a great panel. I've already spoken too much tonight. Thanks for the invitation, Hannah, my favorite rep, to say a couple of words. Great to see everybody. Thank you.
Joe says that in every location he's at, so don't take that seriously. I wanted to mention that you should have been handed an exit survey when you came in tonight. Could you please fill that out on your way out? There are buckets on the shelving in the back as you go out. It would be really helpful so that we know how effective or how not effective our presentation is tonight, because we want to make sure that what we're providing to you is information that is useful and relevant in your life. So I'm going to help keep the panelists to 15 minutes each, so they know I'm going to give them a 5-minute warning. But leading off our panel presentation tonight is Jennifer Rifkin. Jennifer is a social worker who's been working with children, adolescents, and families since 2001. She's currently the Director of Clinical Services for Shrewsbury Youth and Family Services, where she oversees our outpatient clinic and other support services programs. Prior to her work at SYFS, Jennifer was the Director of Youth and Young Adult Services for a decade at the Institute for Health and Recovery. While there, she developed an expertise in treating youth substance use disorders, consulted with the Mass Department of Public Health on youth substance use treatment program and design, and provided trainings on youth substance use across the state. Jennifer also has a strong background in working with youth involved with juvenile justice and child welfare systems. Tonight, Jennifer is going to speak about the increasing prevalence of mental health challenges among our youth. 1 in 5 teens will experience a mental illness, and 50% of those illnesses have an onset by the age of 14, right in the critical time we're at now with all of our middle schoolers. Jennifer will discuss the early signs and symptoms of mental health challenges in youth and how to decipher normal teen behavior from a potential mental health issue. Welcome, Jennifer.
Thank you. So I feel like everyone's probably a little bit freaked out after checking out the hidden in plain sight display. I talked to some people and a lot of parents were really wide-eyed and like, oh my God, what's going on? I want to assure everyone you're here, which means that you're doing the right thing. You've already taken the first step to preventing any issues from starting or any issues from escalating in your home. So congratulations to all of you guys. You're doing a wonderful, wonderful job, even just by being here. I think one of the reasons we wanted to start off with mental health tonight, I know that all of our panelists are going to be talking about some sort of addictive issues in some way, shape, or form. However, much of the root of addictive behaviors starts with mental health challenges. A lot of people start engaging in some of those addictive behaviors due to a limited coping skill set, and they feel stressed, so they see marijuana or alcohol or even vaping as a way to try and cope. So that's something that we're going to talk about. It's just the basic piece of mental health and how it can interplay with addiction. But what we're going to do, we'll just sort of start out. Whoa, I went through a lot of slides here. I can't. Can I get someone to help me with the... It's going, thank you. Sorry about that. I'll try and keep this as effective as possible. So anyway, nationally, about half of people are going to experience a mental health issue at some point in their lifetime. That's a large number of people. And about 20% of kids are going to experience a mental health issue at any one time. Again, those are really alarming numbers. And especially what Hannah Kane was saying earlier, these problems are generally starting in adolescence. So it's really important that we as parents, we as providers, we as concerned community members are paying attention to our kids. That's the first thing we can do to help prevent problems from getting worse. That being said, we do have some troubling numbers right here at home in Oak. This isn't to say that the school isn't doing a wonderful job in trying to support their student body, but even here at Oak, even in Shrewsbury, there are big concerns. As you guys can see, a large number of students, nearly half, I guess, identified stress as a big issue for them. And many, again, concerning number, 14% were engaging in self-harming behaviors. That's a startling number for a middle school population. They're in so much pain emotionally that they're actually resorting to burning themselves, to cutting themselves, to picking at their skin, to pulling out their hair. That's scary. Those are kids that need support. Those are kids that need intervention. Most concerning, we have a large number of students who are actually reporting suicidality. Feelings of wanting to hurt themselves, feelings of wanting to kill themselves. Nobody wants that. So we need to intervene. We need to be aware of these things. Again, I'm not saying this to scare any parents. I think people just need to be aware of the realities that we're facing. Again, this is a stressful time. These are stressful times to parent in. We have to be aware. So some of the most common issues that we see at the clinic at Shrewsbury Youth and Family Services, I would say would be anxiety, which I think is our most common diagnosis, as well as depression and ADHD. And we also see a lot of kids who really, really struggle with just kind of managing life's basic transitions, going from Spring Street or Coolidge or, pick a middle school, pick an elementary school, Patton, changing over to Sherwood. That's a major, major transition. And then after Sherwood for 2 years, moving up to Oak and then on to the high school, those are big, scary changes for kids, and not everyone is equipped to everyone else at managing those changes. Sometimes those changes and those stresses can actually cause clinically significant mental health issues, and that's something that we see all the time at Shrewsbury Youth and Family Services. And it's very common in adolescence. I think these are some of those big issues that arise early in a child's sort of development. So as a parent, what can we do to prevent mental health issues? I think one of the biggest things to remember, and at least from my perspective, the biggest takeaway you guys have for tonight is that as parents, the number one thing you can do is to be involved. I don't care what that looks like, if it's going to the movies with your kids, if it's having dinner with your kids, if it's going for walks with your kids, whatever it is, be involved in their lives. The more you can be involved, the greater protective factor you are as a parent. I know it can be hard when kids start to get older, when they become 11, when they become 12 and 13 and 14. They're pushing back. And that's developmentally normal, folks. It's what happens for adolescents. They start to push away and they start to develop a need for independence. That's good. We want to see that. But as a parent, your job isn't just to say, all right, go to town. Not that anyone, in here is doing that. We want to stay involved. And again, the more you can be involved in their lives, the better. Get to know their friends. When you see them hanging out with friends that you like and seem like positive influences, that's great. Comment on that. Have your kids' friends come over and hang out and watch movies. Have them go to dinner together. That's great. We want to foster that. Another piece that we often forget to do as parents, because sometimes we don't take care of ourselves, is to teach our kids how to manage stress. Show them the tools to manage their life stressors effectively. That can look like doing yoga together, maybe doing some deep breathing together, even saying, listen, I've had a really hard day. I just need 10 minutes to myself to go take a shower. I need 10 minutes to just go read a book. Hopefully it's not saying I need 10 minutes to go pour myself a glass of wine. But that's okay. I know that happens. I just want to make sure that parents are aware that kids are listening. It doesn't mean that you can't drink in your home, of course, but try to avoid equating I'm going to drink to unwind, because then the kids are going to start to think, oh, this is how I unwind. And obviously that's something that we don't want. Signs and symptoms. So this is what we don't want to see. Change in sleep patterns, change in eating patterns. Some of this, actually much of this, is not atypical adolescent behavior. We do see kids who are getting older have changes in their sleeping patterns. Oftentimes you hear of teenagers, oh, they never get up till noon, it's ridiculous, I don't understand, why are they so tired all the time? Some of that is adolescent normal behavior. The body's changing during adolescence. There are a lot of stressors. Kids actually do need a lot of sleep. That's a real thing. But when it becomes excessive, that could be a potential sign of an issue. An increase in irritability. Anyone have a teenager that's not irritable sometimes? Yeah, those don't exist. So again, it can be hard to decipher what's normal and what's potentially becoming a mental health issue. But trust your gut. You guys are parents. You know your kids. You know them better than anyone else. You know them better than your teachers. You know them better than their friends. Even though your kids might tell you, you don't know me at all. You do. You're their mom. You're their dad. You're their auntie. You're their uncle. Whoever you are that's the caretaker for that child. You know your kids. And if something in your gut is telling you, this increase in irritability just feels a little off, it doesn't feel normal, or my kid has been spending an awful lot of time shut up in his room playing Fortnite. Check in with them. It doesn't mean that anything is drastically wrong. It doesn't mean that your kid's going to go jump out a window, but it is a sign I need to check in on this. I need to check in on this kid and see how he's doing and see how she's doing. Because again, we need to be spending time with our kids. We need to be interacting with them. And it's a chance for you to start that conversation and to have those moments with your kid where you're showing, I know what's going on and I'm here for you and I care about you. So mental health issues, this is the scary part. We want to intervene early. Like any sort of medical issue, because ultimately mental health issues are medical issues. They're in that sort of same category, I guess, for lack of a better word. If they're left untreated, they get worse. If you get diabetes and you don't manage your sugars and you don't go to your doctor and you don't take your insulin, it gets worse. If you have cancer and you don't get treatment for it, it's going to get worse. The same holds true for anxiety. The same holds true for depression, for ADHD, for bipolar. Pick a disorder. Generally, you need treatment in order to get better. And the good thing is that in the times we live in now, despite the fact that we have a lot of stressors, we also have a lot of treatments that have been scientifically researched. We know they work. That being said, early intervention is key. It prevents symptoms from worsening. It can help decrease the chance of additional problems from arising in the future. And frankly, kids are going to get more out of their lives when they get treatment early and when they can get those mental health issues resolved. They're going to take more pleasure in their relationships with their family and their friends, and hopefully be more engaged in school and social activities. So here's the big piece. What the heck do I actually say? So none of these are rocket science, and none of these are going to be a perfect fit for your particular family, but just pick one. I noticed that you're having a tough time sleeping. I've heard that for some people this can be a sign of feeling really down. Is there anything you want to talk about? I went to this amazing talk for parents at Oak the other night, and I learned all kinds of incredible information, and really I just want to talk to you about what's going on because I'm worried about some stuff that you seem to be struggling with. Those conversations can feel scary, but they're really critical. Please have these conversations with your kids. You guys are parents. You've been addressing these kinds of concerns your entire lives as parents. You know how to do this. You have the skills. Also, please understand, there are not a ton of kids. There are some, but there are not a ton of kids who are going to say, ooh, pick me for treatment. That doesn't happen very often. So it's not unlikely that you will get that response of, no, everything's fine. But you've had the conversation. If this was a medical issue, if the kid had a broken arm or a sore throat or a terrible headache, you would take them to the doctor. Don't hesitate to act just because it's something that you can't see. And when all else fails, I care about you. I'm always going to love you. I'll be here for you. Where can I get help? You can get help with us at Shrewsbury Youth and Family Services. That's probably the easiest place right around here to get help. We have a variety of services. We have an outpatient clinic where we see kids, families, adults as well. We also have a close relationship with the school, so we can try and support students in that manner. And we have collaborations throughout Shrewsbury. We have a variety of programs that we offer during school vacations and during the summer. That can also provide some skills for our kids. We also provide youth mental health first aid classes, which I don't have time to talk about tonight, but just keep your eyes out if it's something that you're interested in. And here you can contact us. I gave you the number. Oh, please. Other places, while you guys are looking at this, to get help, don't be afraid to start with your child's pediatrician. Your pediatrician is usually a great place to go. And there's also, on the last slide here, in case people need it, for folks who have an immediate mental health crisis, Community Health Link runs a crisis. It's basically like a crisis emergency room, for lack of a better word, a mental health crisis emergency room. Give them a call, they'll get you in ASAP, and you can skip the 8-hour wait in a regular emergency room. And I don't think we have time for questions now, but there will be later.
Thank you, Jennifer. I also did want to note that we have our chair of our school committee here tonight, Jason Pellich, for the third time you can stand up tonight for SCAPE. And I believe I saw Dr. Joe Sawyer walk in. Oh, you're right there. Thank you. And I don't know if there's any other school committee members here, but thank you for all of your support, and thank you for being here tonight as well. Next, we're going to hear from Mark Joyce, who is a master's level clinician at Spectrum Health Systems. Mark has worked in multiple mental health settings since completing his master's degree at Assumption College. Having worked with youth and adults in both inpatient and outpatient settings, Mark is here today to discuss the risks associated with middle schoolers being exposed to high-risk situations and how youth substance use disorders can co-occur with mental health issues. Welcome.
take this thing for a test drive first. Side dial? Okay. Okay. All right, we're in business. Well, hello everybody. Thanks for coming out here tonight. And I think one of the first things that I want to reiterate is, kind of as Jen said before me, just you guys being here tonight is the first step towards making a meaningful difference in the lives of those around us. And so I want to thank you all for taking your time on a Tuesday night to listen to my ugly mug. And so, I mean, obviously, understanding the risk factors is going to be huge, and I'm going to be giving you guys a fair amount of information on a lot of different substances. So please, if I go a little too quick or anything, just stop me. I want to leave you guys with something that you can take home tonight, that if you need to have a conversation about one of these substances, you're going to be prepared for that tonight. So let's get started. I mean, obviously, I think alcohol is one of the best places for us to start. A fun anecdote, before I actually came here for this presentation tonight, I was running a substance abuse group for those struggling with opiate dependence. I did a quick survey of the group members, and I asked, of the substances that you guys started with, how many of you guys started with alcohol and nicotine? 7 out of 7 of them raised their hands saying it was alcohol, and then I smoked a cigarette that night. Maybe I smoked a couple joints the night afterwards. And that's how it all got started for them. And so one of our main concerns with alcohol is how it puts our youth in that place of lowered inhibition. And so I think our main concern should be that unnecessary risk-taking, and I want to focus on binge drinking specifically. Now, I mean, hopefully not many of our middle schoolers are drinking every single night. I mean, obviously that's going to be a big problem if that's the problem we're facing. My concern is those Friday, Saturday nights when we don't know where our kids are and they're having 4, 5, 6 drinks within an hour, and that's when we're having these trips to the hospital, the emergency room, and everything else from that. And so my suggestion to you guys is making sure, kind of like Jen said, get to know your friends, your children's friends. If that means playing Fortnite with them, I'm sorry guys, you might have to do it. And so I think one of the biggest concerns is just how available alcohol is. And so if we want to talk about our children's alcohol use, we have to talk about our own alcohol use first. If we come home, like Jen says, and every night we take off our tie, we kick our shoes off, and then we pour a tall glass of beer, our kids are going to take that and say, well, I mean, if dad does it, if mom does it, it's not that strange. And so honestly, if we want to have a frank conversation with our children, that has to start with ourselves. And so if you need help with alcohol addiction, there are a ton of different resources. And so, I mean, whether it's going to Alcohol Anonymous, going to somewhere like SYFS, or coming to a addiction treatment facility like Spectrum, like AdCare, like CHL, anything of that matter. And so ideally, I mean, look at it here. 90% of youth say that they can easily access alcohol. That's a starting point. And that gets us going into things like marijuana. And so, I mean, again, this is something that has rapidly changed over the course of the last decade and decade plus. I mean, just the other day, Michigan, I believe, legalized recreational marijuana. And so, I mean, that's putting us at almost half the country that has some form of either recreationally legalized or medically legalized forms of marijuana. And so this is something where, at the last talk that we were at with Joe Early, I mean, it's kind of a tough position for our congressmen and everything to be, okay, on the one hand, legally, the residents of Massachusetts have made a decision that marijuana is legal, but we still have all these risks. And so one of the biggest things that I want to emphasize here is that we got to know who our kids know. Our kids are getting marijuana from their friends. I mean, if a kid knows someone that smokes marijuana, they're 25% more likely to smoke marijuana themselves. And so we have to be aware that people are getting it from everybody else. And so with dispensaries opening in Worcester, I think one is slated to be opening in Shrewsbury, who knows when? 2? Oh, 2 of them, actually. And so, I mean, this is our job to work with them and to work with our children and say, okay, if you're going to use marijuana, delay, 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 delay. Because one of the biggest risks of premature marijuana use is struggles with attention, struggles with memory, struggles with engaging in school. I mean, everything that's going to look like depression and anxiety is right there with marijuana use. And so, I mean, ideally, we want to talk about the risks as early as possible. It's never too early to have a conversation about that. If you are looking for any other resources, Learn to Cope is a fantastic organization that if you need help dealing with addiction within your family, I'm going to point you to Learn to Cope for some extra help because they are, without a doubt, one of the best resources in the area. So don't hesitate to give them a shout. Obviously, cigarettes. I don't want to steal too much of the thunder for our amazing nicotine presentation that's going to be coming up shortly. So I just want to emphasize that the perceived risk of smoking cigarettes has undeniably gone down, but that perceived risk of vaping is not quite the same. And that's where we're seeing these numbers skyrocket for youth vaping, and that's going to be one of our biggest concerns, and the next presentation is definitely going to nail it home there. And so, I mean, looking at how cities and towns across the state and across the country have increased the minimum age requirement for nicotine is one of the first steps, but we definitely have a long way to go. I mean, it's very easy to actually go online and order Juul and Juul pods without age verification. I was actually able to go onto eBay and purchase one. So if your kids can set up an eBay account, they can pretty much get their hands on anything. So not to scare you guys too much on that. I know I'm probably speeding through things, but opiates is one of the areas that hits home for me. Now, I work for Spectrum Health Systems based out of Lincoln Street. I work at a methadone program for the treatment of opiate dependence, and I really appreciate what Joe had to say earlier about the dentist. We might think about something as innocuous as having 4 wisdom teeth being removed as not being too big of a deal. But in the 70 clients that I have and that I see on a weekly basis, about 30 to 40% of them started with a legitimate pain prescription. Now, that means for tooth being removed, for a broken leg, for back pain, whatever that is. These addictions are starting in the doctor's office. And so as a parent and as an individual, you have to be ready to discuss your concerns with your provider. Like Joe said, the look some of my clients give me when I tell them that you can take a couple Tylenol and an Advil, they go, "What? You kidding me?" It works. It's undeniable that it actually works. The anti-inflammatory properties are actually better for pain relief than a painkiller. So that's something that I want you guys to really be aware of, that year after year after year, we're seeing these increases in overdose deaths across the board. And I think 2018 was one of the first years that we saw a decrease in it because we've put so much work into it, really. And so, I mean, I think at the end of the day, the perceived risk of heroin is there, but not as much for the pills. I think that's something that, it comes from a doctor's office. A doctor prescribed this to me. It's still dangerous. We should be trying to minimize the use of opiates in any way, shape, or form that we possibly can. And there are, again, a ton of different resources that we can use, whether it's talking with our doctors about pain management, going to things like Narcotics Anonymous, Nar-Anon for your family members, Learn to Cope, seeking medication-assisted treatment. This is something that opiate addiction is not a one-stop shop. I wish it was as easy as just say no. There's going to be times when we fall off the horse, we get back on the horse, we fall off, and we keep getting back on and off, and hopefully we can find some form of treatment that's going to work. And I think one of the last things that I really want to hit on is other medications that come from the doctor's office. Speaking from anecdotal experience and from what I've seen over at Lincoln Street, some of the worst drugs with some of the worst abuse potentials come from the doctor's office. So I'm talking about things like amphetamines. Those are Adderalls, our Ritalin, Concerta, Vyvanse. These are all things for the treatment of ADHD. When I was at UMass, I was in the Honors Psych Rap, an advanced program for children studying psychology. It was incredible the amount of Adderall abuse that was there. And this is starting at 18, 19, and who knows? I mean, it could have been even earlier for some of these kids. And it's something that, okay, if I take an Adderall on a Tuesday to study well, oh, it gives me an extra sense of energy, a little extra focus. Well, let's start doing that on Friday, Saturday night when I want to have a good time, and now I'm having an even better time. And so that's, again, where we want to talk about what can we do without a medication? And it's the same thing as far as anxiety. Benzodiazepines. If we want to talk about there being an opiate epidemic, there really is a benzodiazepine epidemic right underneath it. A significant portion of opiate overdoses have benzos indicated as well. And so when Jen is talking about teaching your kids coping tools, this is what we really need to drive home, is that if we have anxiety, if we have stress, the answer isn't a pill as the first intervention. I'm not saying that these medications don't have a place, but we should try every single non-medical intervention that we have before we try these things. And so, again, learning things like mindfulness, just going to cognitive behavioral therapy, it's great. And so, again, just to kind of wrap it up, guys, I just want to thank you all for being here tonight, and hopefully we can kind of get this conversation started about things that aren't really easy to talk about. And on that note, thank you, guys.
Thank you very much, Mark. It's now my pleasure to introduce Tina Grosowski from the UMass Department of Psychiatry. Tina is the project coordinator for the Central Mass Tobacco-Free Community Partnership, a program of UMass Medical School which works to reduce smoking and secondhand smoke prevalence. Tina works with communities to support programs and policies and provide tobacco prevention and smoking cessation resources for Central Massachusetts region. Tina previously worked as a substance abuse prevention coordinator for the town of Westford for 10 years. The vaping epidemic is a critical issue among middle schoolers and high school students, and big tobacco is specifically targeting our children. Tina will discuss programs and policies and provide tobacco prevention and smoking vaping cessation resources. Welcome, Tina. Thank you for being here.
Great, thank you so much. I'm going to slip this out of here because I like to walk the talk. So this is what we're talking about tonight. Again, my name is Tina Grosowski. I coordinate the Central Mass Tobacco-Free Community Partnership. In Central Mass, we work on reducing smoking and secondhand smoke. And one of the ways we do that is by changing policies at the local level, which we'll talk a little bit about in this presentation, helping people to quit smoking, and having a youth policy commitment from young people. So what we're talking about is nicotine addiction. We're going to be talking about the industry, the tobacco vaping industry. The whole point of the vaping tobacco industry is to make money for its shareholders. And how are they going to do that? Smoking rates have gone way down. That's the good news, which we'll talk about. So how are they going to get new customers to get hooked on nicotine? So in 2009, the federal government says you can't make any flavored cigarettes. So the industry had to go back to the drawing board and come up with a way that they're going to make new products with lots of flavors, which is what we're going to talk about, to get more people to buy their products at a really young age. If you have, you can see all my white hair. Joe Early, about the same age probably when we were growing up. Doctor, when you were growing up, on Saturday morning, between every cartoon, there was an ad for tobacco, for cigarettes. People walking on the beach, looking like they were having lots of fun, especially women, having a good time, and the only way to do that was to be smoking. So we've changed the social norms. That's the good news. But the bad news is that now these new products with the same tactics and strategies that they used to get our generations, my generation, hooked on nicotine through combustible cigarettes, what they're doing now is getting young people hooked on vaping. In Massachusetts, almost 50% of young high school students have tried vaping. A lot of the data is actually low, and Cassandra's going to talk about some more data later, because these products really started taking off last fall in 2017, and a lot of the school surveys where we get the information were done in the spring. So what is vaping? What does an e-cigarette look like? They all have a cartridge in them of nicotine in a formulation of propylene glycol. And it's not water vapor. That's the main thing that you need to talk to your young people about, your children about, and to understand for yourself. They all have a battery in them. You turn on the battery, it heats up the propylene glycol, you inhale the nicotine, but you're also inhaling the glycol, and we're going to talk about that. There's many different forms, and the most popular one right now is a Juul. These are pretty old school. The ones on the right called vape pens. There's others that are very like this called dab pens, and they're specifically made for vaping liquid THC, which is, you know, the active ingredient in marijuana. Kids are not using these so much anymore because the Juul company, two guys sitting in Silicon Valley a couple of years ago, came up with a high-tech way to deliver nicotine, especially in a formulation called nicotine salts. Why is the Juul so exciting is because young people do not associate this with smoking. Every fourth grader knows smoking's not any good for you. This is a way to use technology to deliver nicotine, and it's like having an iPhone 10. Who doesn't want an iPhone 10? Everybody wants an iPhone 10. You get an iPhone 10 that delivers nicotine. So it looks like a flash drive, which is the second component because it's so disguisable. So young people can have them in school, and most administrators and teachers and staff and parents, if they haven't been educated about it, you wouldn't even know that this was a nicotine delivery device. So you can see right here in the picture, it charges up on a laptop or computer, and it has what are called the flavor pods. Each flavor pod is what has the nicotine in it. Most high school students use Juul, and they tell us that in the surveys. The problem with Juul also is that it has high nicotine content. You all know nicotine is the addictive substance, right, in tobacco. And each Juul pod has the equivalent of a pack of cigarettes worth of nicotine. So that's a lot of nicotine, especially for the adolescent brain. And youth tell us that they use at least a pod to go through the day at school, juuling at school, into the afternoon, and maybe a second one into the evening. So that's the equivalent of 2 packs of cigarettes in terms of nicotine. Lots of different flavors, lots of e-juices or bottles of nicotine that go in the different kinds of e-cigarettes. But again, the Juul and the knockoff of the Juul, which is a bow or a blue, they all have the nicotine pods on the right. Again, very high tech. You slip it onto the Juul device, and then you can inhale the nicotine. So there's lots of new emerging products. This is, beginning of November 2018. In a month, in December, by Christmas time, there may be even something newer coming out. The Sorn on the bottom right is very sleek. It feels great in your hands. A lot of kids are interested in this. It does not come with Juul pod. You have to drip the nicotine into it, so it's not quite as high tech. What's the problem? The problem is the glycol when you heat it up and the other substances that are in the Juul or in e-cigarettes, because propylene glycol is a vegetable oil, like having spray Pam when you cook, right, on your skillet. It's an aerosolized oil. So when you use propylene glycol in foods, because it's in a lot of junk food or potato chips or pretzels, you take it in, you chew it up, you digest it, because what's in your stomach? that digests your food? Acid, right. Acid. Is there acid in your lungs? No. So what's happening to this oil? It's dripping, dripping, dripping through the aerosol into your lungs. And the new research that we do have about it, remember these are new products, we don't have 20 years of research like we do on combustible cigarettes, shows that this propylene glycol is causing respiratory infections, pneumonias, and that's a problem. It's a problem for anybody, but especially for young people. So that's the glycol. This is not water vapor. The second piece is the flavoring. So is this fresh orange juice from Market Basket that's in the Jewel Pod? No. How do they get the flavoring? They get the flavoring from chemical called diacetyl. Diacetyl is a chemical that used to be used in microwave popcorn to make that incredible buttery flavor that makes you want to eat the whole bag of microwave popcorn, right? Until in the microwave popcorn industry, the workers in the factories were starting to get sick from the heated up diacetyl that they were inhaling. It started to cause anomalies in the lungs, again, respiratory infections, pneumonias. So the FDA banned the use of diacetyl in microwave popcorn. But these products are not FDA approved, except for age restriction. As bad as cigarettes are for you, they are approved by the FDA. So now you have the diacetyl flavoring and you have the glycol. The problem with the flavoring is the number one reason why youth tell us why they use these products is the flavoring. And why is that? In this country, we raise our kids on flavoring. Flavored cereals, flavored Jell-O, flavored yogurt. And what do you do when you're a parent and you have your young 2-year-old and you get that first ear infection? You go to the pediatrician writes you out a prescription, you take it to CVS, you get the antibiotic, and what flavor is that amoxicillin? Bubblegum, grape, cherry. That's what all these new flavors are like. So for a young person, an adolescent, if something is medicine and it's flavored, it's good for you. So if something is flavored, it couldn't be bad for you. And they think these products are all flavored water and do not have any nicotine. So our job is to educate them and understand there's lots of nicotine. There's no such thing as an e-cigarette without any nicotine. And they have these other chemicals in them. Okay, so it's not like sucking on a lollipop. This is not just water vapor. So what do we know about nicotine and the adolescent brain? Jennifer talks a little bit about the adolescent brain developing. It still develops until age 23 or 24. If you use nicotine when you're an adolescent and your brain is still growing, there's a much higher chance of getting addicted to the nicotine because your brain is growing along with the nicotine as the child grows. We know that it contributes to mood disorders. It can lead to mood disorders. Especially it disrupts learning and memory function and the ability to pay attention, which is everything that you want your young people to be doing to be good learners. Nicotine disrupts that and contributes to difficulty with learning. And it can prime the brain for addiction to other drugs. Again, it's like dripping a drug into the brain. We work with substance abuse users like at Spectrum. They get off heroin, they get off cocaine. A good treatment, a program nowadays will get people off nicotine because when they come out, they go back to their families, go back to a job. If they're still using nicotine, their recovery is so much harder because their brains are ready to use nicotine. The brain, this is all about brain science. It's not about whether you're a good student. It's not about whether you're on the football team or you're a cheerleader or you have all AP classes or you're in the band or you're in theater. This goes across the whole spectrum of young people, and it has to do with brain science. And when you get hooked on the nicotine and you're going to the bathroom every hour on the hour to use your Juul in school, that is addiction. Young people today, what they think of addiction is what they see on TV, What they see on TV is a man lying in an alley with a needle next to him, and that's not what this addiction is like. So they have to understand that this is addiction for young people and nicotine. So finally, we want to share with you that the way we work on policy is to work on policy at the local level. Juul is advertising all its products on social media, which is, making the Juul be real appealing. And we, at the local level, they make them sweet with the flavorings, cheap prices, and easy to get in the convenience stores and gas stations, unless you have some policies in place. The most significant policy at the statewide level, thanks to Representative Kane and some of the other progressive leaders in the Senate and the State House representatives, the new law starting January 1st raises the age to 21 for all tobacco products. Statewide, for all tobacco products, you have to be 21 starting in January, and a ban of all tobacco products in pharmacies starting in January. This has been done on the local level, town by town. The next policy is called the flavor restriction. About 130 communities have passed the flavor restriction, which gets all these flavored products out of the convenience stores, gas stations, mini marts, and put them in an adult establishment like a vape shop or a tobacconist. Shrewsbury has not passed the flavor restriction yet, so I invite you to think about joining with SCAPE to advocate for this at the local level. And these are young people that work with the 84 movement who work on this at the local level. And the new website for information that some of you probably picked up out in the lobby is called Get Outraged, which we hope you will get outraged. All of this is on the website. There's a school toolkit that schools can use for curriculum and ordering all these printed materials. Talk to your kids, dispel the myths about vaping and the Juul, and help them to understand that you don't want them to be, and they don't want to be duped by the industry, tricked by the industry into being the next generation hooked on nicotine. Smoke Free Teen is a good website to use for teens on the risks of vaping and how to get off nicotine. Make Smoking History is the state website for learning about the policies by town. You can put your town in, and you'll see that Shrewsbury has not passed the flavor regulation. Finally, Tobacco Free Mass is a statewide advocacy organization, and that works to advocate for these policies on the statewide level. And I think we'll take questions at the end.
Thank you. Robert Hackinson Jr. from Dynamic Influence is a professional speaker and edutainer that has made his mission to engage and educate. Robert started Dynamic Influence in 2004, and since then he's delivered thousands of presentations across the United States, Canada, and around the world. As a professional magician, certified hypnotist, and a master of influence, it's very scary to have him here, but Robert is uniquely and masterfully infuses his educational lectures with magic illusions, mind games, skits, and comedy in a way that keeps audiences captivated while reinforcing his educational lessons. Over the years, Robert has partnered with several organizations, creating and delivering presentations on a number of important topics to a variety of audiences, including presentations on social media dangers and cyber safety, substance abuse awareness, vaping and marijuana, and bullying prevention to youth, college students, parents, and professionals. Robert will be briefly addressing some of the technology and social media landmines that we as parents need to know about. With the rise of smartphones, social media, gaming, etc., there are certain dangers that parents and kids might not see coming until it's too late. Please join me in welcoming Robert.
Thank you. Good evening. I was going to start off a little bit of a stretch. You guys can do it with me. Ready? Now you've been sitting here still for a while. Put our hands like this, thumbs down, palms out, come across slowly, watch your neighbor. Always interesting, hello. Wiggle the fingers a little bit, come across this way, interlock, and squeeze. Open, come back across, wiggle one more time, stretch, back across, interlock, squeeze. Put out your thumbs just like this and rotate your thumbs counterclockwise, which to the left, all the way over to the other side. That is how a magician stretches. Again, I am a professional magician. We're going to skip some of the magic tonight just because there's a lot to get through in a very short amount of time. I'm going to kind of skim through a bunch of information, and I'd be happy to kind of dive into it in a little more detail with any questions at the end. So, social media. There's tons of it out there, right? Social media, good, bad? Both. There are great things when it comes to social media. I mean, think about it. It gives you a voice to the world. Right? I mean, you have a question, you Google it, somebody's talking about it somewhere. It can be an amazing thing. Asking for directions. When's the last time you asked for directions? I think you can tell how old you are if somebody's trying to give you directions, right? You're like, wait, just give me the address. All you need is GPS, right? It can be a great thing. However, as one very wise man once said, with great responsibility with great power comes great responsibility. Very true with Spidey powers, also very true when it comes to social media. I called in my presentation social media landmines because like a landmine, oftentimes these dangers don't see them coming until you step on it. Too late, blows up in your face. The goal is to make sure that we're teaching our kids how to use this technology responsibly. I think of social media almost like driving a car, right? When you get your license, you don't just get a license, right? You have your permit first. Why? Car, although a very powerful tool, use it irresponsibly, you're going to crash, hurt yourself, or somebody else. So what happens? You have to have formal education, go through driver's ed. Then you as a parent have to sit there in the passenger seat with a kung fu grip, trying to teach them what to do, what not to do. Because again, powerful tool, use it responsibly, crash, hurt yourself, or somebody else. Social media, same thing. Some of the landmines that we have to look out for, everything from anxiety and communication skills, emotional harm, safety, and hurt reputation. So, dive into it. Anxiety and addiction. What do I mean by social media anxiety? First off, what's your name? Alicia, you just took the best picture ever. And as a teenage girl, what do you have to do? You have to post it up on Instagram. Do you sit there and wait and I'll look at tomorrow? No, you wait with 30 seconds. Refresh. No likes yet. Refresh. Where are people? Refresh. No likes. Refresh. People are stupid. And all of a sudden, this picture that you love, maybe all of a sudden you're not feeling so great about it because all of a sudden you're not getting the likes. We are in this day and age where it's all about the likes. It's kind of crazy. But that's the truth. It's all about the likes. Why? One, we put a thing of importance on it. You get a lot of likes, that's importance. And as Freud tells us that we always want that feeling of importance, that feeling, right, of being important. And if you get a lot of likes, then we're trained in the society that means that you're important. Another thing is that it's like getting a compliment, right? It's like showing up to work and you look great today. Thanks. You look awesome. Thanks. And the next day they just walk away. Like, you want the compliment. You're looking for that. And when you don't get that, all of a sudden you start feeling bad about it. We have to teach our kids that we have to not care so much about the likes. There are teens that they'll figure out what the best time to post a picture would be to maximize their likes. If it doesn't get enough likes, sometimes they'll even take a picture down. They'll post it later. Again, if you like the picture, that's what matters. Before social media, if you like the picture, that is all that mattered. Nowadays, we need outside validation. We need other people to tell us how great it is, and only then is it that great. That's where it's backwards. Make sure we're teaching them that. It's not all about the likes. We have to stop caring about it. We also understand, I'll skip through the negative comments because it's kind of self-explanatory. We also look at the quantifying stats. What we mean by quantifying stats is you're able to compare yourself to other people. Right? You're able to look at their pictures, the number of followers they have, the number of likes, just the pictures, what they're posting. Oh my God, they have 2,000 followers. I only have 40. They have 100 likes. I have one. It's my mom. And all of a sudden you worry about these things. You see it, you feel insecure, and maybe it's just looking at pictures and videos. They have such an amazing life. The reality is we post perfection, not reality. That's the truth. Even as parents, sometimes we see that. We look at things, we look at pictures, and we look at ourselves like, oh my God, am I not doing enough? I don't make my kids clothes by hand from organic hemp. We have to take a step back and stop comparing ourselves. I like to think of social media almost like an iceberg, right? All you see is the tip of the iceberg. Underneath the water, the majority of it, they're dealing with the same insecurity, same stress, same stuff as everybody else. You just don't see it. So if you're ever looking at that and starting to feel that self-conscious, understand all you're seeing is that tip of the iceberg. They're not posting all the other stuff. You're not alone. There's another thing where it's called fear of missing out, FOMO. Fear of missing out is kind of like technology addiction. Has anyone here ever felt addicted to their phone? Anybody? Show of hands. Yeah? Has anyone done the thing? You check your phone, you put it away, checked it again, time hadn't changed. One of those things. Yeah, sometimes we do. We get addicted to our devices. You leave your phone at home and you start flipping out. We understand. When it comes to youth, they say the youth spend about 7.5 hours per day of screen time. This does not include homework. This does not include school. 7.5 hours per day of screen time. This does, however, include TV. This includes Netflix. This includes YouTube. This includes gaming like Fortnite and others. But roughly about 7.5 hours per day. You think about it, just 2 hours a day. 2 hours a day. If you do that with the math per year, that's about a month per year. No sleeping. 30 days, no sleep per year at 2 hours a day. That's a lot. Now, when it comes to things like gaming and stuff like that, am I saying, don't let them game? No, I think gaming's okay, but I think we have to make sure that we're setting limits on it. I do think we need to make sure that we are setting limits not only on gaming, and if they want to game, dude, it's not a right. It can be a privilege. You have to earn that time. Did you mow the lawn? Did you do all your homework? Did you do the dishes? You got 30 minutes. You figure out what that is, and you set those limits, and you're able to do that. Because there are a lot of negative effects when it comes to it. I think we are spending a little too much time. There are more and more studies that are coming out. One particular looked at about 1 million teens. They looked at 8th grade, 10th grade, and 12th grade, and they looked at the correlation between the amount of screen time teens had and mental well-being. And they found that universally, right around 2011, 2012, right here, all of a sudden that mental well-being plummeted for all three. Why did it plummet? What happened 2011, 2012? Majority of teens got smartphones. They looked at other deciding factors, looked at the economy and things like that, still, no matter what. And they also found that the more screen time, so this is at 1 hour, this is about 40 hours per week, the more screen time, didn't matter whether it was video gaming, texting, social media, all of it. The more time, the less happy. We have to understand, even sometimes people say, well, how about but the people that have a low social interaction, right? They have that high social anxiety. They can't have that face-to-face communication. Even with those people that have low social interaction, they found that the more screen time, less happy. Why? I think, one, that we're social beings. We need to have that face-to-face interaction. We need to be able to do that. We need to be able to talk to each other. And texting isn't the same. I also think that might kind of go back to the whole, looking at other people, that comparing yourself, all that stuff plays a role as well. I think as adults, we need to make sure that we're leading by example. Right now, we spend about 4 hours a day. And granted, I also understand. I completely understand the fact that, when it comes to, When it comes to our social media use or our technology use, things like reading the newspaper. You used to have a newspaper. Now you use your phone. There are those times, but there's also really convenient now, right? You weren't just always walking around with a newspaper. Well, maybe you were, but most people weren't always walking around with a newspaper, but now you always have your phone. And then what happens if you're bored? You're sitting there and you're bored. What do? You grab your phone. Please understand, I was right there with you. I remember my daughter, she was about 2 at the time. I remember sitting there in the playroom. All of a sudden, she's bored. What do? Grab my phone. All of a sudden, I felt those little hands on my face. Dad, look. She was trying to talk to me. Head's buried in the phone. Ever happened to you? Trying to talk to someone, head's buried in the phone? It's annoying, right? It's like, hey, pay attention to me. Like, shh, I'm texting you right now. It's like we need to be able to have that face-to-face interaction and talk again. I think it's an important thing. We also understand that my wife and I, we actually went to Seattle for our summer vacation. I went to the first Starbucks ever. That was the picture I took. That's not a stock photo. That's the picture I took. Because we need to be able to actually look up. And I think as parents, we need to make sure that we're doing that. We're putting our phones down and setting limits for ourselves. What happens now when I get home, I take my phone out, I turn the ringer on, I put it on the little basket in the kitchen. That's where it stays. I call it the basket rule. Kids, same thing. Kids ever have friends over? Everybody's on the phone. 1, they're not actually communicating. That's a bad thing. And then 2, do your kids ever do anything stupid? They do? I'm like, so what happens? They're about to do something stupid. One of their friends has to be like, hold on, let me snap it, because we have to document our stupidity now and post it for everybody to see. What happens if your house is in the background when they're doing that and that's what they post? Yeah. I like to have that basket rule for them too, making sure that that goes there, setting that time aside. And I understand it's painful, especially when we want to escape. My kids, still young, sitting there watching Frozen for the millionth time. I'm just rocking on the couch, just let it go. But we have to make sure that we are present in those moments, taking the phones, putting them down, because our kids are in fact noticing. We need to set that limit for ourselves. When I'm looking at it, 4th grade, 5th grade, 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade, 9th grade, 10th grade, sleeping with their phones next to them at night. 4th grade, 5th grade, sleeping with their phones next to them at night. I understand. This is my alarm clock. Get an alarm clock. They're like $1. We understand sometimes parents will say, well, they don't have a TV in their room. A phone is worse. The phone connects them to the entire world. I like to not have phones behind closed doors, especially at young ages. Making sure that they're always there, because you don't know who necessarily they're communicating with. Again, just set some limits, making sure, an hour before dinner time or no phones during dinner time, hour before bedtime, whatever it is, you figure that out. Have a central charging location in your house. If it needs to be in your bedroom because you think your kid might be sneaking down to it, it can be in your bedroom, just having it away from them. I also think it's affecting communication skills. I speak not only at middle schools and high schools across the country, but also colleges and companies. I continue to hear that communication skills are going down. The ability to effectively communicate. People might argue that it's more communication than ever now, but I would disagree. And the reason why is because communication is a lot more than just the words that you say. 60 to 65% of communication is not what you say, but how you say it, body language. If you include tone, that number jumps to about 90-95%, not what you say, but how you say it. So if all you're sending is texts and emails and things like that, a lot of that stuff isn't coming across. It also opens the door for miscommunication too, right? Like, for example, what's your name, sir? Madhu, you text me, right? And you say, Rob, you're so stupid. Just those words. Now, if Madhu doesn't pull LOL, a JK, a winky face, I don't know if he means like, Rob, you're so stupid. Rob, you're so stupid. I don't know if you do thing, it's open for interpretation. Now, at this point, what happens? I might get upset. I fight. You're stupider. That's not what happens. Often what happens in this case, if somebody gets emotional, they get upset. As a teenager, they don't actually go to them, they go to everybody else about them, which makes things a lot worse. My advice, especially, understand that when it comes to that communication, if that's breaking down, we have to calm down and then go and actually talk to them. Pick up the phone, actually talk to them, go and meet them. We understand there's also emotional harm, cyberbullying, hateful posting, happens in a lot of different forms. Why is it so easy? Well, we understand you're protected through the screen. You don't have to worry about anything. We understand you have access 24/7 from anywhere, anytime. You understand you can do it completely anonymously. But the biggest thing is that you don't actually see the hurt. You don't see the damage that you're causing. I think it's a big thing. You're in an argument with somebody. There's always that line. Do we ever cross that line? Yeah, sometimes. How do you know if you cross that line? Dude's crying. But we have to understand that you don't actually see that when you're posting it online. I like to think before you post something, I like to think about the golden rule 2.0, post about those you want to post about yourself and those that you care about. And if you're a bystander that you're seeing something happen, make sure that you're posting it up there as well. I think where bystanders fall short, though, is that they often attack the people that are doing it. I think you should just support the person that's being targeted. Ignore the other person because that's what they're looking for. They're looking for that attention. Talked about that golden rule. Safety, more 4th, 5th, 6th graders. I'll skip texting and driving. Don't do that. Kids are watching too, understand. Meeting people online. More people are meeting people on more 4th, 5th, 6th graders talk to strangers online than 7th and 8th. More 7th and 8th than 9th and 10th. Universal. Every school I go to always asks that question. Make sure you're asking your kids who they're talking to online. I think when it comes to gaming, making sure that they're only gaming with their friends. You can go and listen to them if you need to. Make sure you have that constant communication. So sometimes they think they're talking to one person, in reality it's someone completely different. When it comes to who those dangers are, we understand that typically targeting between the ages of 11 and 15. Not only girls, 30% boys. What they do is they target people. They do what's called a grooming process. They try to get a lot of information about that person. And then once they start talking and build that relationship, then they're going to test that trust. And then from there, once they test that trust, they'll be able to use that against them. I always say make sure if you're talking to somebody online, if they're asking for personal information, asking to meet up, whoop, warning flag, tell an adult. Checking in, location, make sure you go to location settings. If they don't need your location, turn them off. Online challenges, I always advise make sure that your kids, if you want to do something stupid, just come to me first. If it's a stupid online challenge, let them do it. Why? Because some are deadly and dangerous. And you want them to come to you for those as well. Overall, when it comes to sexting, it does happen even at the middle school level, 13 to to 18, you can see those are very much the ages. This is misleading though, because sexting includes everything. It's any type of text, any type of suggestive photo, things like that. When it comes to new photos, stats show about 4% have sent. Why do it? Pressure, acceptance, pressure by somebody that you love. If you ever feel pressure by something that you love, run. It's not a healthy relationship. Maybe it's because NFL stars, politicians, maybe even because the Amish are doing it. True story, can't make this stuff up. Who knew they had cell phones? Amish, right? Seriously. Often it's because someone's begging and pleading. They just snap it to me because it'll self-delete. What happens if they do a screenshot? That's right. So we have to understand before you're giving somebody a lot of power over you, and then from there, what can happen if they do send it out? Maybe somebody breaks their heart. I know, kids, they might actually, date and they break up. It happens. And when they do break up, what happens also, they take a picture, they send it out to at least 3 people. On average, every sext is seen by at least 3 people. And then it goes through the sexting tree until eventually it gets all the way back to the original person. What happens from there, we understand that if you have a nude picture of a nude minor on your phone, that can be considered possession of child pornography. If you send it to somebody, that can be considered distribution of child pornography. Especially if it's sent with malicious intent, that's usually when the charges happen. And then anybody that gets it and that shares it, it can happen there. I advise, these laws are there for your protection, like the Amish boy who was sexting with what he thought was a 12-year-old girl, shows up as a horse and buggy, finds out it's an undercover cop. Again, can't make this stuff up. My advice, if you ever do get a picture or something like that, make sure that you're able to tell the school or the parents or whatever's happening, depending on what the relationship is there. Again, 4% have sent it. 15% have received. Shows that it does get shared around. That also shows that 96% of kids are making the smart choice. That's the part I would focus on, 96% making the smart choice. I also think it's a very simple sexting rule called the mom rule. If you wouldn't want your mom to see it, then don't send it anywhere. I think that's a pretty good rule when it comes to just anything that you post up online. If you wouldn't want your mom to see it, then don't post it online, because everything that you post is a direct representation of who you are. A nice little billboard rule of thumb, kind of going from Mr. Early over there. If you wouldn't want a billboard for everybody to see, don't post it up online. Everything is being tracked, as we know. You've been shopping for something online, you didn't buy it right then. For the next 3 months, you keep on seeing ads for exactly what you're looking for. Yeah, so you're being tracked. Colleges are using it, companies are using it. All this stuff is there. From the movie The Social Network, the internet's not written in pencil, it's written in ink. It is permanent. So what's the solution? I'm going to show you a number. I want you to say the number aloud. I'm going to show you a second number, add it together, say the answer aloud. I'm going to show you a third number, add it together. You get the idea? What's the solution? Math. Ready? Here we go. 40. 1,040. 1,070, 2,070, you got this, 2,090, 3,090, 4,000, right? It's a 3,100, but thanks for playing. What? 1, 2, 3,000, 40 plus 30 70 plus 20 is 90 plus 10 is 100, not 1,000. Okay, you're only 900 off out of 3,100. Now, how many of you feel confident that if I gave you extra time to double check your math, you would come out to the right answer? Show of hands, anybody? Some of you are still like, I still don't get it. Most of you are there with me. That's the entire point of today. What happened? You went really quick. You made a mistake. Made a big impact. You were 900 off at 3,100. And that's the entire point of today. My advice, you made a simple mistake, made a really big impact. We have to make sure that we're stopping and double checking our math before we hit send. Your phone, although a great, powerful tool, use it responsibly. A simple mistake can make a big impact. Just think about those rules. We covered a lot of information. I'll be able to take more questions after the time. I think I'm out of time at the moment, right? Go quick. I absolutely suggest following your kids and tracking them. That's a good thing. And having that docking station at night. That's all my information, dynamicinfluence.com if you have any other questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Our final panelist tonight, and then we'll do Q&A, is Cassandra Anderson. She's the Chief of Community Health at the Worcester Division of Public Health and the Central Mass Regional Public Health Alliance, of which Shrewsbury is a member. Cassandra will review the 2017 Regional Youth Survey data for Oak Middle School. The survey is administered to Oak Middle School and Shrewsbury High School students approximately every 2 years and includes topics such as substance use, violence and safety, dietary behavior, mental health, and sexual health. Cassandra will share some of the results with us now for Shrewsbury.
Thank you very much.
Good evening. Thank you for staying with us tonight. I know it's a long night, but this is really important information. And what I want to talk to you about is what we see here happening in Shrewsbury. One of the things that we do as a health department for the region is to take a look at and monitor the health of youth and adults. And one of the ways that we do that is through the Youth Health Survey. No? This one.
This thing, yeah, go down.
Got it. All right. So we do the Youth Health Survey in the schools every other year. And the survey was participated in by the Shrewsbury Public School District, the middle and high schools in 2017. We also do the survey in the Worcester Public Schools, the Millbury Public Schools, Grafton Public Schools, and the Leicester Public Schools. And we're able to take this information, put it together, have a regional data set, be able to compare things across the different communities, and then we're also able to take the data and look at it against the state. They also do a similar survey. We use many of the same questions, so some of them we're able to compare those results. And the same thing with, there's a federal survey. So we do combine a lot of the same questions. Some of them we have separate questions. There's something of interest in a school in the area. They say, we'd like to have a question about this on the survey. We really want to know about this type of thing with our students. And so we add that. So not all of the data that we collect is comparable across all of those different groups, but a lot of it is. And this presentation has some key findings that go along with the topics that we're discussing tonight. That's some pictures of the reports that were put together. So we've looked at the data, and there's different ways to separate it out. I'm going to go through some different demographics and how the data comes out across demographics. So a little of this was brought up earlier in the presentation on mental health. What is the emotional health of the students at Oak Middle School and Shrewsbury High School? So when we look at this by gender, we really see some things come out that are really, we should need to take a look at and pay attention to. So particularly for young women, we see that 29% of Oak Middle School females and 34% of Shrewsbury High School females say that they felt so sad or helpless every day for 2 weeks or more in a row that they stopped doing some usual activities in the past year. That's a huge number of young women. So that, is something that we need to pay attention to as a community, that there's something we need to work on with young women. We also see this when we look at seriously considering suicide and hurting themselves on purpose. We see higher rates of this among young women. I think something that we see as well that's higher in the middle school among males and females is bullying. And that's something that we see across the board in all schools, right? Middle school is a really tough time. There's more bullying that tends to occur in middle school, but this has such a huge impact on young people's mental health that it's really something to be concerned about and think about and talk to your kids about. This is another place where we want to look at what is impacting the emotional health of young people. So when we look at students who took the survey and we look at their answers and we, cross that with whether or not they said that they were lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and those things that they can check off on the survey, we see much higher rates of those same questions that we were talking about before. So like more, 52% saying that they felt sad or hopeless in the past year, 34% seriously considering suicide, 40% saying that they hurt or injured themselves. So these are really alarming behaviors or things that these young people are thinking about. So we have to think about, as a community, how are we supporting young people who have different sexual orientations? We really need to think about that, because nobody wants to see, we see here 11% are attempting suicide. Nobody wants to see that happening in their community. So what can we do as a community to support people with different sexual orientations? Another thing is that they also are saying that they're not as hopeful about their future. So that means that there's something going on with them, right? They're seeing their future and they're saying, I don't see it as great a place for me as for everybody else. So what can we do as a community to support these young people? One thing I think that's really nice to see is that in Oak Middle School, that a large percentage of the students are saying that they are really positive about their future. They anticipate going to college. They have an adult in their life to help them plan their future. They really like thinking about the future. They're hopeful about it. That's a really important thing. That's a protective factor for them in the long term. And you want to support that positive attitude transitioning into high school. And so that's where I think a lot of things that, even as we go through the data here, this is a really key time in young people's lives where we need to think about how are we going to support people when they're transitioning from middle school to high school, and how are we talking to our kids? How are we making sure that they know that we're there for them? That's the most important thing, that we're there for them, that we will talk to them if something is going wrong. And so you can see it drops off a bit in high school. And this is a really key transition period here. And we see that in other data as well. Between the middle school and the high school, the stress level shoots up between middle school and high school. It's still the highest thing in middle school that they check off when we ask them, what are the top issues for you? Stress is still 39% for the middle school students, but that jumps up to 68% in high school. So there's a transition happening, and these young people are feeling really stressed out. It's really important that they feel that we are there to support them as a community, as a family, in this time period. I think some things that are a little more stressful in middle school that we anticipate is they're still learning to deal with peer pressure. That's really tough for them at that time. They're discovering romantic relationships. What does that mean? That's a little more stressful for them at that time. They're checking that off as a top issue. And then bullying, again, is something that's happening. But that stress is really being highlighted as that's the key thing for young people in middle school and high school. All right, so one of the things that we talked about here tonight was vaping and marijuana. So these things really are linked together. We know that nicotine is addictive, and when you start using nicotine, it primes your brain for other addictive substances. And we also know that marijuana is being used in a lot of new ways. So I don't have a chart for this here, but we do have a question on the survey, which we decided to add because we were talking about this in the community, and people were saying, well, how are our young people using marijuana? So on the last two versions of the survey, we had a question that asked about how they're using marijuana. And the way in which young people are using marijuana is changing. It used to be primarily young people said that they were smoking marijuana in a joint, in some kind of combustible device. Now, young people are saying that they're vaping marijuana, they're saying that they're eating marijuana. So, and this is a huge change, you know, like 90% saying they're smoking it to like 30% saying they're smoking it, and then using other ways. So it really is changing how young people are using marijuana. And the same thing, this is, you know, we see between middle school and high school that there's a huge increase in the number of young people who are using marijuana. It's extremely important at this time in middle school to start talking to kids about vaping and about using marijuana and saying, this is not something I want you to do. It's really important to me that you don't use these substances. This is why. It could be about your family values. You could talk about the addictive substances, the nature of the substances. It could be about how they can lead you to make other poor choices. Whatever is really important to you, it's very key that your kids know that this is something that you don't want them to do. That's one of the major things when we look at the research, why children choose not to vape or use drugs, is because they talked to their parents about it, and their parents set very clear rules and said, I don't want you to do this. That's the number one thing that you can do. And talk about it early, and then remind them often, this is still something I don't want you to do. If you have friends who are doing this, you know, come and talk to me about it, and being really clear about that. And I think another thing to see here is that the perception of risk. So we have young people who think that there's no risk in using a vaping product or no risk in using marijuana. That's really huge. If they don't think there's a risk, of course they're going to think, well, it's no big deal that I use this. So that's why it's really important that you talk to them about the risks of these things. So we were just talking about the screen time. That was a really great presentation. One of the things that we're seeing in this survey as well is that the number of hours of screen time that youth are reporting is going up. It's increased in the last 3 surveys between 2013, when students said, 46% were reporting that they used a screen for something other than homework for more than 3 hours a day. That was 46%. Now we're at 58% are saying that they're on a screen, not for homework, more than 3 hours a day. And I think that the issues behind that were discussed really well. What's really great to see is that the physical activity that is being done by young people in Shrewsbury High School has stayed about the same. It's still around 50%. That's a really positive thing, and that's a good thing about this community, that you have really high participation in sports and other physical activity. That's a protective factor for young people. Thank you very much, and we'll be taking questions.
Thank you all very, very much. Each of your presentations was really informative and helpful. If you are leaving, please do leave the forms for us. But now we would welcome anyone who has any questions. If you want to step to the microphone, we would be more than happy to answer them. Yes, sir? Let's watch your leg.
Just talk to him proactively. My first question is like 5th grade too early to talk about that? And also, I just want to understand, maybe a question for our school administrators. I just want to understand what the school teaches them about that, so we could double down and kind of reassure on top of that. Thank you.
Sure, great question. 5th grade is not too early. 4th grade is not too early. And I'm not sure what Shrewsbury Public Schools does for their health education. Some in middle school if there is still health education. But there's some good websites for yourself. The Get Outraged website has lots of information on it. The state website called Make Smoking History has lots of information on it. The Truth Initiative, a website called The Truth Initiative, has some great new information on vaping especially. Like all the experts were saying tonight, it's not too early. It's better for them to hear it from you, the truth and the facts from you, than to get it on their phones, which there's lots of misinformation on their phones about it. And you should talk to your 5th grade teacher and ask her or him directly what they're teaching this year in your son's classroom. And ask your son what he knows. You know, say I went to this talk at the school and this crazy lady was talking about something called Juul. And have you ever heard of a Juul? And he'll say, oh yeah, Sammy had one of those at the sleepover the other night. And the mango was awesome. You know, so yeah, you want to talk to them, absolutely. And maybe one of the administrators or middle school principal, do you want to answer about 5th grade?
In our health curriculum, we talk about great choices and bad choices, particularly when it comes to peer pressure around smoking and drinking. That comes out of 5th and 6th grade.
Yeah, 7th grade, they do a unit on tobacco and drug use.
I'll also tell you that in 5th grade, if your child takes the bus, they're on the bus with 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th. And I know that my son, who's in 7th now, but when he was in 5th, came home and told me a whole lot of that he learned on the bus the first week of school. So I would just encourage you, they're probably seeing it and experiencing it before you realize. I believe somebody else had a question. Sir, did you?
Thank you for a very nice presentations. Now, it's a two-part question. So part one is, in terms of like electronics and using their phone, is there a way where we can, like, what's your recommendation about tracking kids basically in terms of either look into their messages, or are there any kind of apps where we can really get into that? That's part one. And part two, with Fortnite, is that some kind of a reality that we have to live with right now, or there's, honestly, like, should we fight it back basically as parents, or should we just accept it and live with it? So I haven't really looked into it that deeply, but it seems like it's very popular right now.
Fortnite is definitely popular. I think when it comes to just gaming in general, it's Fortnite right now, but it's constantly changing. There's always going to be new ones that are going to keep on coming. I think when it comes to gaming, understanding, gaming addiction is a thing. There's a clinical name for it, diagnosis for it. And I think if you're looking at gaming, understanding, if you're gaming with your friends, okay, but setting limits, and as I said before, I think if you look at it as earning time, because you as a parent, you're the one that's able to control that as to how much and how little they get to do that. When it comes to your phone, there are a lot of different apps. I mean, there's like Mama Bear and things like that that you could look at, see what they're posting on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram. There's new if you have iPhones, the new screen time is, if you go into settings, screen time is there, so you can actually set that up. There's other apps out there, like Moment is another one for iPhones, so that you can actually set up as a parent account, and then for your child, you can limit the amount of time that they have, whether it's texting or social media or whatever the apps are.
What was the name of the app? You said Moment?
Moment is one of the apps, and then also it comes with your phone. If you have an iPhone, is screen time. Just go into settings and you scroll down, you'll see screen time, and click on that, or you can Google it, and it'll have plenty of information there too.
I'll also tell you from experience, and one of you mentioned certainly taking the phones out of the room at night, but I found my son started to have problems going to bed at night, and I figured out it's because he was gaming too late, watching, or either on the Xbox or doing something, and so we now have a hard and fast rule about what time is acceptable to do any electronics up to, and then it's electronics off for the 2 hours before bedtime, just to help with that transition. Are there any other questions that anyone has? Yes, sir? Ma'am? I can't see, sorry. I feel like Chris Mena up here, I can't tell who anyone is. That's hard, the lights.
Good evening. First of all, thank you to the Shrewsbury Public School Department and the panel for giving such an information night to us parents. I have two suggestions to the school, Shrewsbury Public School. If they could work on that in the future, it would be really helpful. First of all, when you all talked about stress for teens, would Shrewsbury Public School do something for the high school students, the timings of the school starting 7 in the morning? They sit up to 11:30, 12 in the night studying, and then morning 7 o'clock going to school adds to their stress, and stress relates to then vaping and all other things come with it. That's the first thing. And second thing is, if they think that vaping and other things are not harmful for them, would it be constructive if they could have a presentation from teens or youngsters who have gone through this and are ready to volunteer and tell them the side effects of it? Coming from a teen's mouth, they might be more responsive to it than coming from a professional or an adult. So if some presentations of those sort are conducted in schools, where the teens come and talk to them and tell them that this is what we went through because we did these bad choices, might be we could save some of our students from doing this. Thank you.
Dr. Sawyer, do you want to address the school time start?
Thank you for your questions. Thanks to all of you for coming out, and this is really great to have such a good showing, and I know lots more people will be watching it, and we'll post a video like we did with Dr. Pody's presentation last year. And thank you to our panelists for all the information. We worked really hard last year to create a strategic plan for the school district. Lots of you, I'm sure, responded to our surveys. Some of you came to our meetings where we solicited feedback from parents, from students at the high school and the middle school level. We solicited lots of feedback from our staff, of course, as well. And I think we have a really good set of goals that we've begun implementing over this current year and over the next several years through 2022. You'll be happy to know that one of those goals that we're going to be starting on very soon is, again, looking at this issue of school start times. We looked at this about 15 or 16 years ago. It was pretty early then in the research to say that it would be better if we could have our students, our adolescent students, start later. We were able to make a very slight adjustment at the time to the high school start time, but it was essentially tabled because of the constriction that we have relative to the budget, where we have a school district where we have 3 sets of buses, 1 set of bus and 3 sets of runs that we have to make. And without adding lots and lots of additional buses, it's very difficult to shift. And there was a lot of talk at the time, feedback from elementary parents not wanting to go too early, even if were able to make high school students go later. In the interim time, we've continued to see that the research base is getting stronger and stronger. And I personally believe that we need to get to a place where we can start our adolescent students later. That's going to take resources or some sort of shift in how we do things. We're going to be starting a school start time advisory committee very shortly, so look for information about that. I expect we're going to be spending the next year, and our goal lays out that we'll be spending this next year educating the community about this issue. And I believe that the intent is to have that committee make a recommendation to the school committee about a year from now, probably in about November or December of 2019, to potentially be implemented the following school year. One thing we did learn with some initial work we did a couple of years ago is that communities that try to rush that process, it often fails. Because not enough people understand the rationale behind it. There's a lot of sense around, I went to school early and I was fine, but we know that there's physiological issues that go with this, and we need to make some change, but we have to do that in a responsible way, and we have to be able to get support for making that change. So I appreciate you raising that issue. In terms of bringing younger people in to speak to our younger people, to our adolescents about issues. That's an idea I will bring back to our administration at the high school and the middle school. I think there may be some groups out there that do some of those kinds of things. That said, I think that our health department, our school administrators have been very thoughtful over the years in terms of bringing in different speakers who appeal to students on a variety of these kinds of topics. One of the pieces that I think has been excellent is that we shared at the school committee, and I want to recognize Noelle Freeman, who's our director of school nursing, who's sitting right here in the second row, who has been working with Cassandra around this data. She and I made a presentation to the school committee recently about some of the statistics that you saw this evening. We're going to continue to share them because we have to keep sharing this information with the community. And so the bad news is that we have some real concerns that we have to address. That said, we're no different than any other community in that this is not in isolation an issue here in Shrewsbury. In many cases, we have better numbers than a lot of other places, but it still doesn't mean that we don't need to address them. So finding whatever ways we can, and I do see Jeff Lane sitting back up there near you, who's our new director of health, physical education, and family consumer science. Jeff, can you just wave so people see who you are? Jeff just came to us this year and is doing an outstanding job with that department. And I know that he's really trying to energize our health educators and our physical education teachers around how we can address that through that way. And one way we use these health statistics is to adjust our curriculum year to year in terms of our health classes as well as our overall presentations and what we bring to our students. So we are far from perfect. The problems of society exist here in Shrewsbury like they do anyplace else. And our strategic plan, which I'll continue to try to communicate around, is going to be hitting on how can we improve our students' well-being? How can we improve our students' mental health? How can we make sure our students are getting what they need, not only academically, but socially and emotionally and behaviorally? And that's all of our responsibility, not just the schools, certainly us as a community of Shrewsbury, working with groups like Shrewsbury Youth and Family Services. We need to take action. We need to do that in a thoughtful way. We need to do that in a planful way. But there is a sense of urgency. And the fact that you're all here tonight, I really encourage you to speak to your friends, talk to your neighbors. We need to have this conversation and continue it to move ahead so we can help support our kids even better than we are now. So I really appreciate the questions. Thank you.
I'd just like to add that, can people hear me? I'd just like to add that it's really important for young people to hear from other young people, but the most important thing is to have information be from many different sources from all over the community. We know from research that a one-time presentation on any particular topic is not evidence-based and not effective. So even if you brought somebody in one time in school to talk about vaping with students, evidence shows that, a week later they might not retain the information. It's better to have it ongoing from many different sources throughout the whole year. But we do have the 84 movement, which is the young people that work on this advocacy. And we've tried to start an 84 chapter here at the high school, and we're going to continue to work on that.
Great. Are there any other questions? Great. I really thank you for coming tonight. I would also encourage you to like the SCAPE and the SYFS, Shrewsbury Youth and Family Services, Facebook pages and to follow information. And when we do post this video, if you could share it and let your friends know about it, that would be really helpful so that we can continue to educate more and more people. I want to thank the district attorney for being with us all night here tonight. Really appreciate that, Joe. Thank you. And for the Hidden in Plain Sight. And if I could just remind you as well, you'll see the plain buckets up back, if you could put the surveys in here. And thank you one more time. Great panel. I really, really appreciate all of you being here. Thank you.